Hi everyone. Deepika is a law graduate from NLS Bangalore who is currently the team lead and senior resident fellow at Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy. Deepika previously worked as an associate at Amarchand Mangaldas and at Dua Associates before moving on to Vidhi, where she has been working for the past 4 years on judicial reform projects. Thanks for being here today, Deepika. I'm really glad that you're here to speak about the interesting work that you've been doing at Vidhi and more broadly about a career in research in the judicial and legal reform space. Uh,
Thank you, Manasa. Thank you for inviting me.
to begin with, can you share a bit about your background and how you've reached where you are, especially with respect to the decisions that you made to transition to a very different field of legal practice?
Sure, that's a very loaded question, but I'll try and answer it as succinctly as possible. So as you pointed out already, Manasa, graduated from NLSIU in 2012. So it's going to be nearly 10 years now since I graduated. And in the last 10 years, I have worked across multiple roles before finally discovering what my true calling is and ending up in a job where I can say I'm truly satisfied at the end of the day with the kind of work I'm doing. So soon after graduation, as you said, I worked at a corporate law firm. I was with Amarchand Mangaldas in Bangalore in their litigation, real estate, and then capital markets teams. Then I soon realized within a year that that is not what I see myself doing long term. In fact, it was at crossroads with essentially why I decided to study law. Uh, the primary reasons were to understand the way society functioned and work more closely with people. It might sound like lofty ideas for, say, an 18-year-old deciding to take up law as an option to study, but those were actually it. I was really curious to understand what were the reasons behind various things I observed on a daily basis. Be it how people were placed very differently in their lives, different opportunities that people had. Um, and I was curious to see what was at play there. And somehow it felt like studying law would give me those answers. And even when I was at law school, I was actively involved with committees which worked closely with various segments of society. I was with Legal Services Clinic, which which provided legal aid to people from marginalized sections of the society and conducted legal literacy camps in schools, NGOs, etc. I was also involved in activities of those Law and Society Committee. So looking back, I see a clear trend there that I was truly interested in connecting with the society, understanding its problems, and more importantly, helping people realize and exercise their rights. So a job in a typical corporate law firm could not have ever been able to satisfy these urges of mine. And as any public minded individual, I guess I made my attempt at UPSC. I attempted the civil services examination and cleared the preliminary round. I couldn't clear the mains, and I then realized that I did not want to spend 2 more years of my life going through another cycle of the examination. Uh, so then I moved on to a role in a litigation firm, which is Dua Associates. It is one of the more reputed dispute resolution law firms in Bangalore. I worked as a litigation lawyer for nearly a year for more than a year with Dua Associates, and then became an independent litigation lawyer and worked as such for around 1.5 years. So in the course of say around 6 years, I essentially had experience with a corporate law firm. I had my experience with how potentially a bureaucrat would function while I was preparing for civil services examination. Then I moved on to litigation. Of the three, I would say working as a litigation lawyer was extremely eye-opening for me. That experience, I went in to the field hoping that this would be it. This is where I will be able to satisfy uh, my urge to contribute to the society while utilizing the skill sets that I had developed over the years as a researcher and as a lawyer. However, what I quickly realized was that irrespective of how hard I worked as a lawyer, the system itself was crumbling. The judiciary at all levels. And in these 2.5 years that I was practicing as a lawyer, I appeared before multiple legal fora, be it consumer fora, district courts, high court. And across all these levels, the system was, as I saw it, incapable of delivering justice. And that is its constitutional mandate. And through my own experiences as well as what I was observing around me, realized that it needed complete overhaul for it to uh, stay true to the constitutional promise that has been made to all the citizens, that they will have access to justice, that justice will be affordable, and everyone will be treated equally, fairly. So these principles that uphold a society based on rule of law was not being adhered to because the system was incapable of it. And I did not want to be a passive participant in such a system. And I was looking out for roles where I could use my skill sets more meaningfully. And that is when Vidhi happened. Vidhi was around the same time looking to open a new office in Bangalore and had put out a call for applications for the position of senior resident fellow. And that is when I landed this opportunity to use my skill sets more meaningfully to bring changes to the system I was working with.
That's great. And I know you started out saying that, it sounds very lofty and so on and so forth. But I think having that interest and that kind of clarity at a young age is what led you where you are, right? Like you experimented through different ways of reaching your goal, which were in line with your background and expertise, of course, and then connected all of those learnings to find the niche that you thought was most impactful and most satisfying, given your interest. So, I mean, it's really nice to hear about that and hear how you reached Vidhi after all the different experiences that you've had.
Absolutely. As an I don't think I would have been capable of bringing in the nuances or bringing in the depth to the work that I do today if I had not gone through all the experiences that I did. I'm sure every old person says this, but that's true, at least in terms of the work that I'm doing in trying to reform the judiciary. It was very important that I had, first-hand experience dealing with the system, which I did as a litigation lawyer, and also experience in how the laws ultimately impact the end users, which I did as a lawyer in a big corporate law firm. So all these experiences were extremely crucial for me to be able to do justice to the kind of position that I currently have.
Yes, I agree, and I think it's great that I mean you were able to connect all of them. I think that was also something that becomes very important when you're looking at you figuring out what you think is very impactful, and then coming to that conclusion based on the introspection of your past experiences. But in terms of the impact that you mentioned that Vidhi does, we'd love to know more about what is it that Vidhi does, what is the vision of the organization, and what have you been working on for the past 4 years?
Sure. Vidhi is an independent think tank. We mostly undertake two kinds of work. We have our own independent research work, where each research fellow identifies an area of his or her interest and expertise and does extensive work in understanding that area before publishing a report or any other sort of output. So that is on the independent work side. But ultimately, Vidhi is an organization that is driven by achieving uh, ground level impact. That is what we strive towards. So even with this independent work, our goal is to ensure that it leads to some form of uh, uh, reform, some form of impact, either independently, if it is within our control, or through engagement with the institutions that can make such an impact happen. So, Vidhi, as you will have seen, engages regularly with the government and several other institutions, including the judiciary, of course, in translating our research work into actionable solutions which improve lives of people. I think that is the ultimate end goal that we all work towards. So we are as much legal researchers as we are policy professionals, because we think it goes hand in hand, quality research and smart policy making to ultimately lead to better lives for all of us. And in terms of what I am doing at Vidhi, as you pointed out, Manasa, I have been a part of Vidhi for the last 4 years. Um, and my focus has been judicial reforms. I started off as a senior resident fellow, focusing on various issues that I had identified as perennial problems plaguing the system. I started off with a project on government litigation and studying the writ jurisdiction of Karnataka High Court, that is my parent High Court, where I practiced for 2 years. So I wanted to understand why writ petitions, which come under Article 32 of the Constitution and Article 226 of the Constitution, why they take as much time, given that the very purpose of those articles is to safeguard fundamental rights of citizens. If a court entrusted with safeguarding and upholding fundamental rights of citizens is taking so long to even hear those petitions, then clearly something is going terribly wrong over there. So I wanted to understand why that is happening. So my first independent research project focused on these two issues, government litigation and writ jurisdiction. And since then, I have worked on multiple projects, released around 7 to 8 research reports, and worked directly with the judiciary across all its levels. I have worked with the district court, with the consumer fora, with the high court, and now I continue to work with the Supreme Court and some of its most ambitious projects. Right now, in over the course of last 1 year, I have been assuming the role of a lead for the judicial reforms team at Vidhi. We call ourselves Jaldi Initiative, Justice, Access, and Lowering Delays in India Initiative. We are a team of 8 young lawyers spread across 3 cities, trying to understand the system and also now focus on designing solutions for the system. So we are entering a very exciting phase as a team focused on judicial reforms. We are moving slightly away from focus on unearthing the reasons behind these issues to actually designing solutions for the issues that we have already understood. So this, I would say, is Jaldi 2.0. We are engaging with experts from multiple other disciplines such as design, technology, management, to essentially see what a reformed judiciary can look like. We have spoken about problems for so long. We have put in as much effort to understand the reasons behind the problems, but now we want to see how we can solution these problems. So that has been my focus over the last 1 year and will continue to be so in the years to come, because as you can see, judiciary is not an easy institution to understand and work with. So what we have started is this Jaldi Innovation Lab, which will focus on designing solutions, and that is going to be what I'll be working on for a few more years.
That does sound very fascinating, and what I'm really surprised to know is that at Vidhi the fellows have so much flexibility in defining their own research areas or focus areas for the organization to prioritize. Right? I mean that's what I got from what you said, that you can focus on areas or issues that concern you and work on understanding those and or designing solutions to address those. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
great.
That is one of the best things about working at an organization such as Vidhi. Fellows, irrespective of their seniority levels, are given a lot of independence to choose what they want to focus their energies on. Of course, as a part of team, you will have to cater to the team's goals on an annual basis, but there is always enough room and enough flexibility given to individual fellows to focus on areas that they feel most passionate about.
Yeah, that is really admirable. I think that's a great thing that Vidhi does. And even in terms of the work in general, the kind of problem that it's trying to solve in society, the kind of work that Vidhi does is relatively unique, right? Like, do you know of any other organizations that do work similar to Vidhi, specifically in the legal and judicial reform space?
Uh, so the uniqueness of Vidhi lies in its focus on converting research into impactful solutions, right?
Hmm.
So you will find multiple organizations that are research oriented, that publish very high quality reports, and there is definitely a need for that. But I think where Vidhi's USP lies is in the fact that it equally focuses on taking that report forward to engage with the system that the report deals with. We don't shy away from conversing with, say, the government. Even if our report directly critiques any institution, critiques the government or the judiciary, because
Hmm.
that is what we do as researchers, right? We are focusing on an issue mostly because that issue is problematic. We don't want to focus on something that is working perfectly well. Of course, people do that as well. You need data and statistics even when things are going well. But mostly as legal researchers, in the kind of field we are, the intent is to focus on the problem. And when there is a problem, you're obviously critiquing an institution which is in charge of ensuring that that problem does not exist, or is in charge of solutioning that problem. So at Vidhi, our focus is on understanding why the status quo exists as it does, and then engage with people who are in positions of power to collaboratively work towards a solution. So that, I think, is a unique quality at Vidhi, which not many organizations emulate. However, things are thankfully changing. And especially in the judicial reform space, there are quite a few organizations which do commendable work in understanding judiciary as a system, and have now also started engaging with the judiciary. And the good thing is that judiciary has also now opened itself up for engagement. That is something, again, a unique feature of the area of work that I am a part of, as opposed to government, which is sort of used to engaging with civil society organizations and has a ready template for that sort of collaboration. Judiciary is taking baby steps in that direction, which is a commendable, improvement in the right direction. So as the demand for such engagement increases, so will supply, right? So we do see a lot of churning happening in the judicial reforms ecosystem. Some of the very well recognized organizations who are doing this kind of work are Daksh, which is a Bangalore based organization. Then you have CLPR, Center for Law and Policy Research, again, a Bangalore-based organization. Then you have CPR, CHRI, which are Delhi-based. So we do have, and then of course you have an IPFP. Uh, so a lot of research-oriented organizations do exist out there focusing on legal research, uh, and not necessarily as much on policy making, but that, as I said, is gradually changing.
Thanks for sharing those organizations as well. But if I come back to the work that you're doing at Vidhi and what you mentioned about Vidhi's USP, and if I can break down the area of work into specific roles related to research, I can see two kinds of roles primarily. The first being legal research, focused on understanding issues, awareness, and probably advocacy eventually of the findings from that kind of research. And the second might be action research that attempts to focus on delivery of justice at an implementation level, right? By collaborating with the relevant stakeholders, helping them sort of convert with these findings into actionable change on ground and change in the system. Would you say that's correct understanding?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, as I said, broadly, two tranches of work. One
Mhm.
is independent work, the second is engaged. And by engaged, I don't mean engagement only with the powers that be. It is also with other organizations working in this field, other experts from within this field, and several other disciplines. So yes, it is both. One is research, then advocacy resulting in engagements or direct engagements with institutions and organizations that have taken up a cause that is of mutual interest.
Okay. And for students or for young professionals who might be interested in these kind of roles, could you share a little bit about what a typical day for a fellow, either at Vidhi or any of the other organizations that do similar work, might look like within each of these verticals? So within the legal research part of things, as well as within the action and implementation research.
Sure. So what a typical day looks like varies depending on, I think this is where the position that you're at comes into picture. Uh, so if you are a research fellow or even a senior resident fellow, most of your time is spent in reading. I think that is one of the basic requirement, that you need to read a lot and read diverse materials. Uh, because as I said, ultimately we are looking at not just typical academic outputs, we are also looking at policy papers. And for policy papers, you cannot be limited by just the field that you are a part of or are qualified in. You need to expand your horizons. You need to see what is happening in other fields. So most of your time is spent in exploring, in reading, in researching. The next is in writing, in translating those thoughts into words, uh, uh, be it articles for newspapers or long papers based on your research, or a research report itself. So you will be doing a mix of reading and writing almost on a daily basis. And then if you're at a slightly higher position within the organization, you will also be doing a lot of managerial duties. You will be talking to other experts, other organizations, other stakeholders, because as I said, ultimately in policy making, you need to be not only aware of what is happening in other fields, you also need to have enough connections in these other fields to be able to work towards solutions. Just to give you a ready example, right? So in the last 1 year, we have come out with reports at the intersection of law with the design field, law and architecture, and law with the field of technology. So we have published reports on virtual courts, on online dispute resolution, which lie at the intersection of law and technology. And we have published a report on reimagining consumer fora, which focuses on court infrastructure. And on this, we worked with Srishti School of Law and Design. Uh, so in doing this, we necessarily have to, build connections with people from various backgrounds. And the position that I am at, most of my time and energy is spent in doing this, in exploring solutions collaboratively, in increasing our outreach either within the institution or as a part of the ecosystem, which is the judicial reform space. So yes, a typical day varies based on what kind of role you have within the organization.
Right. And you have grown within Vidhi over the past few years and experienced both these roles, right? Like first you joined as a senior resident fellow and now are at a managerial position at as a team lead. So how has your experience been with both of these roles? Like what do you enjoy the most or what do you dislike the most about the work that you did in both the roles?
Okay, this is a tricky one. Uh, so my journey within Vidhi has been very satisfactory. I have absolutely no complaints about both the roles that I have essayed here. It has been challenging, and I have experienced steep learning curve, both as a legal researcher and as a policy professional. I would say as a researcher, as a senior resident fellow, your focus is mostly on ensuring that your research is on spot and that you're able to give a holistic picture to any person who is likely to take this report forward for implementation. So that is
Hmm.
the entire focus. But as a team lead, you're focused on the second stage, which is how to get this report into an implementation mode. So while and for that to happen, you're equally working with researchers who are doing bulk of the work, which is researching and writing. You are guiding that research project in a manner that it will lead to implementation. And you're equally on the other side engaging with people who are going to be implementing this. So I think because I had that experience as a senior resident fellow doing my own independent research work, I am now in a position to balance both these requirements as a team lead, because I know what a quality research product looks like. And I now have equally come to know what it is that the stakeholders are interested in, what it is that the government can do, what it is that the judiciary can do, because ultimately all these are driven by competing interests of various parties involved. So you might have a super high quality research paper, but at the end of it, if your suggestions are not implementable, then nobody in positions of power is going to be interested in it. It will contribute to the narrative, of course, and that has its place. But if we are looking at impact at ground level, that won't happen.
Right.
So I think that is the role that I'm currently essaying at Vidhi. And yeah, both these roles are equally important, and I'm glad that I got to do that first before being promoted as a team lead.
Right. So, I mean, maybe you enjoyed both these roles equally, but do you think there's a particular kind of person who might prefer one over the other? And it could be related to personality or skills or qualifications for either of the roles.
Right. So um, I guess if you're looking at whether this kind of work is a good fit for you, one question you definitely need to answer is how frustrated you are with the status quo. If you're not frustrated enough with how the things are, then you won't be able to take this journey as a researcher, especially in judicial reform space. So
Hmm.
one of the key things that was a point of frustration for me as a researcher was how slow moving things are. Because, as I had mentioned, for me, ultimately, I want to see change. I want to ensure that through my work, the system improves, even if it is just by an inch. With that mindset, as in having that mindset, in an ecosystem where the institution is the judiciary can be quite frustrating, because judiciary is extremely
Mhm.
slow moving, and it is also extremely closed, right? As in, you can say in India, at least the government is a little more transparent and a little more receptive to criticism, has a template to engage with criticism, but judiciary is none of that. So as a researcher, I did feel that frustration. And if you are a person who wants things to happen overnight, then this is perhaps not the space for you. Uh, but now, as a team lead, I have come to perhaps see why things are the way they are. Having spoken to sitting and retired Supreme Court judges, High Court judges, having spoken to the staff at various levels, what happens within the judicial administration is an entirely different ballgame, and there is absolutely no visibility on that as a general public. So my role as a researcher at Vidhi has given me that opportunity to interact directly with people who form the system at various levels. So now I'm in a position to understand why the system is the way it is, and I know why it is as slow moving. So perhaps as a corollary, my patience levels have also increased. So if I were to point out one skill that you need to have, it is perhaps waiting it out. You know, your research that you put out today might be considered very well by academics, but if you're looking at impact, that might happen only 2 or 3 years down the line. And
Or
that has
maybe
happened with one
10.
of my projects, or maybe 10, or
Yeah.
maybe not in your lifetime.
Yeah.
But the hope is that it will somehow, somewhere make a difference. For instance, I was just trying to illustrate this with an example. I joined Vidhi in 2017, and as I mentioned, my first project was on government litigation, and the writ jurisdiction of Karnataka High Court. One of the key things that I had highlighted over there was Karnataka High Court is bogged down by most of the litigation coming in from the government. And even within the government, the most noticeable culprit is the urban development department. Nearly 75% of the writs filed by or against the government was because of the urban development department, UDD, at the state government level. Now, that of course was a key finding. We did our dissemination, we did our advocacy work, but nothing materialized immediately. And as a researcher, like obviously that was quite frustrating for me. But I moved on to other projects, and then you won't believe this. Just at the end of 2019, nearly 3 years after that work, uh, this got picked up by UDD, and they involved us in formulating their litigation management policy. And we played a key role in the department itself gathering data regarding all its pending litigation. So we devised a tool which was used to gather data from 276 urban local bodies across the state. Until then, this data was not even available. So yes, your your research might not have an immediate impact, but the idea is that you stick to the path, and hope that ultimately it makes some difference somewhere.
Yeah, I get that. So, this is probably in terms of the soft skill or the mindset that you would need to get into the sector, right? And I think this can be applied to working with the government system or bureaucracy in general as well, not just the judiciary, but something that you should keep in mind if you're looking to change systems that have been going on for the past 70 years. But are there any hard skills or particular kinds of qualifications that you think anybody working at Vidhi or in judicial reforms should possess? For example, is a law degree absolutely essential?
So far, Vidhi has mostly hired lawyers.
Lawyers. Okay.
Uh, that is changing gradually. Uh, the key reason for that is we realize that, even if it took us quite a while to get there, we realize that lawyers don't have all the solutions. um, in fact, we are great at identifying the problems and understanding why they exist. But in terms of designing the solutions and policy making, we necessarily have to engage with other disciplines. And this realization has what has led to us engaging and onboarding people with other qualifications. For example, now we have someone with economics background, someone with
Okay.
humanities background. So things are slightly improving in that direction, where Vidhi becomes a truly multidisciplinary organization itself, uh, and not just engage with other disciplines, but have that expertise within itself. But in terms of other qualifications and skill sets, as I said, being a researcher who can write is extremely critical. Uh, so that is something that we look out for when we are sifting through the CVs, and even during our interviews. We
Okay.
look at how good a person is in being able to identify the issues and dissect them legally. So, given that the focus has been on lawyers, one of the things we test is their legal acumen. So we are not looking at how well versed you are with various laws, provisions of constitution, not at all. We are looking at whether, if you are confronted with a daily problem, are you able to identify the underlying law and policy that is resulting in this situation. So essentially, legal acumen, curiosity, is what we look for when we read through CVs. And given that the first filtering layer is through CVs, it will help if in your CV we can see that you've already done this kind of work before. And you can illustrate that primarily through the kind of writings you've done, right? There is no other way for us to know how curious you are, or how well read you are, or how well you can formulate your thoughts. So it will help if you've had a few publications. And again, here it is not necessary that you have publications only in reputed journals. Even if you're writing regularly for some of the online blogs, portals, newspapers, there are plenty of opportunities to get published nowadays. So if you have done that before, I think that is something that we are almost immediately attracted to, because that shows that you have been doing the kind of work that Vidhi does.
Got it. Got it. I think that would really help people who are looking to apply in the future. And in terms of young professionals or students in general, beyond what you've already covered, would you have any thoughts or words of advice that you can share, especially for those who are looking at either the judicial reform space or careers in the development sector in general? So it could be things that you wish you had known when you were a 20-year-old.
Again, going back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, it is very important that we use every opportunity that we get to formulate our thoughts and write about it. If I go back to my law school days, one thing that I think I did not do enough is write. My writings were limited to the course requirements, the curriculum requirements. So I did write around 60 projects in those 5 years, but I did not look at getting publications out there. Of course, this was nearly 12, 13 years ago. We did not have the kind of fora that we currently do, say Live Law, Bar and Bench, and multiple other blogs that currently exist. So if you are a law student or a young professional with lots of ideas and thoughts on what is and what should be, then I think you should put that together in the form of an article and publish it, because only when you write will you realize the kind of nuances that every issue has. And as you write more, I think those thoughts will only mature, and you will be able to put across your opinions in a lot more convincing manner. And that is extremely important for a policy professional and a career at Vidhi. At Vidhi, we are, as I again have repeatedly said, the focus is on driving impact, and that can happen only if you are able to convince the other party to your point of view. And a starting point to that is to be able to write well. If you are a young professional or a law student, please do write more.
Great. I think that's great advice for policy professionals in general. Like you said, I mean, legal professionals as well as people who might be working on policy issues outside this space. So those are all the questions that I had, Deepika. But is there anything else that you would want to cover?
No, that's it, Manasa. I think this has been a great experience. It was a sort of journey down the memory lane, even for me, through what I did in law school and post that in the last 10 years. So, thank you for having me. I hope whatever I said is of use.
It's definitely going to be very useful. My sister is a law student, so I'm going to make sure she listens to this. But thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing such wonderful advice and giving us so much time.
My pleasure. Thank you.